Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are taking something that's usually incredibly messy, deeply personal, and, let's be honest, entirely unpredictable, human love, and we're going to apply the rigorous, unyielding logic of corporate mathematics to it. I know. It sounds totally counterintuitive, right? Treating love like a software engineering project? But stick with me here. The insights we're pulling from our source material today are literally going to change how you look at your closest relationships.
So, picture this. You're on a perfect first date. The lighting is just right, the mood is fantastic, you've got the flickering candles, the whole shebang. But instead of leaning in and asking that classic, safe question like, "So, what's your favorite movie?" you pull out a spreadsheet. Yeah, a literal mathematical matrix for due diligence. You ask your date to start filling in values, assigning weights, and ranking their life priorities. Sounds like the absolute fastest way to ruin a romantic evening, doesn't it? It kind of feels like a sci-fi dystopia. But, as we're going to see, this clinical approach might actually be the secret to saving not just our love lives, but society itself.
And that brings us to a really fascinating contrast. On one side, we've got your classic Hollywood romance. You know, it's spontaneous, it's uncontrolled, it's this magical strike of lightning that you basically just cross your fingers and hope never fades. On the other side, we have what our sources call relational engineering. Now, this isn't about killing the romance, it's actually about protecting it. It relies on three main pillars: raw willpower, a structured method to channel that will, and the awareness to read reality clearly. It's about moving away from love as just a random event and treating it as a mindful, structured process, one that can actually sustain itself when that initial magical spark inevitably hits the brick wall of real-life stress.
Okay, let's really dive into this framework. The core macro thesis of today's explainer is that a functioning couple acts as the fundamental, invisible infrastructure of a healthy society. Think about that for a second. A relationship isn't just a private emotional refuge where you go to hide from the world. It is a complex system, a literal strategic engine for social well-being and innovation. The way you manage your intimate relationships actually ripples outward into absolutely everything else. To make this work, we've got to stop treating our relationships like, say, resilient houseplants. You know, the kind you buy it, stick it on a windowsill, give it some water every now and then, and just kind of hope it survives on its own. Instead, think of a relationship as a complex operating system. It requires constant updates, security patches, and active monitoring of the error logs. In this system, what we'd normally call a relationship crisis, like a massive blowout argument, isn't a sign of terminal failure. Actually, scratch that. It's treated exactly like a startup's bifurcation point. It's just a mechanical trigger forcing the system to either evolve, pivot, and upgrade, or crash completely.
Which brings us to Section 2, the 4 columns test, a relational audit.
So how do we actually evaluate this operating system? Well, before you even grab a pen and draw a grid on a blank piece of paper, there is a strict rule of engagement you have to follow, the 5-day rule. This is a deeply surgical test, and you absolutely cannot rush it over a quick coffee on a Tuesday afternoon. It requires a minimum of 5 solid days of profound reflection. Why? Because you have to bypass your immediate reactive emotional instincts. You have to tune out momentary societal conditioning and what you think you should want. You need that deep, structured awareness to figure out your true, inescapable baseline needs.
Now, I want you to mentally build this out with me. Imagine a first column where you list your inescapable goals. We're talking the absolute truest foundations of your existence. In column 2, you rank them by priority. Column 3 is where it gets a bit mathematical. You distribute a total of 100% across these goals, assigning a specific percentage weight to each one. And finally, column 4. This right here is the ultimate stress test. Next to each weighted goal, you write down the name of the specific person you would instinctively call to help you achieve it or just to share it with.
What's incredibly fascinating about this is how pure math dictates romantic availability. Our sources highlight that everyone's resource allocation is vastly different. Imagine someone with deep traditional roots whose ultimate goal of starting a family takes up, say, 90% of their emotional and temporal resources. Everything else in life gets squeezed into that remaining 10%. Now, compare them to a hyper-focused, competitive executive whose career, travel, and networking eat up their 90%. That executive literally has zero mathematical space left to accommodate the needs of a stable partner. It's not that they lack love, it's just a pure, simple resource allocation mismatch. Moving on to Section 3, the 51% rule, becoming a majority shareholder. Now, this is where we tally up the score to find our magic number. Think back to that fourth column you just mentally filled out a minute ago. If your partner's name naturally appears next to vital goals that sum up to at least 51%, well, congratulations. Your system is mathematically and scientifically validated. You have officially found the ally you need to navigate life. The absolutely crucial point here is this. You are essentially securing a majority shareholder position in your life. It's exactly like a corporate mergers and acquisitions analogy. Think about it. When two giant companies merge, they don't align perfectly on every tiny little department, right? That would be impossible and way too expensive. No, they merge over core strategic assets, the 51%. To make the merger work, they willingly drop the 49% of marginal interests that just cause unnecessary friction. In a relationship, giving up that 49% isn't settling. Look, if you want 90% alignment, you're just looking for a clone of yourself. Dropping the margins is just the price you gladly pay to ensure absolute core stability. That takes us to Section 4, AI Empathy Spell Checkers. Using technology as your rear-view mirror. So how do modern systems manage the daily chaotic entropy of a validated couple actually living in the real world? The sources introduce an incredibly provocative concept here, artificial intelligence. Now, I want to frame this exactly as our source material does. We are not talking about some creepy robot stepping in to replace human love or some machine telling you what to feel. Instead, think of it as an objective, emotional spell checker acting as a rear-view mirror. It simply checks our emotional grammar when we're too blinded by our own stress or anger to see our own blind spots. Let's look at how this builds in practice. Imagine an AI running securely in the background of your digital interactions, trained by top psychologists. Step 1. It reads your typing patterns. Step 2. It identifies a sudden spike in passive-aggressive syntax or maybe a dramatic drop in response latency. You know exactly what I mean when you start rapid-fire texting without even thinking. Step 3. It sends a proactive notification. It essentially taps you on the virtual shoulder and says, "Hey, heads up, your tone is highly destructive right now." It prevents a massive escalation and a screaming match at 3 in the morning. It doesn't magically solve the fight for you, but it gives you the crucial awareness to swallow your pride and use your method. And finally, Section 5. The invisible societal infrastructure, the real societal scaffolding.
For our final segment, we're going to zoom way, way out. I want to challenge you to stop looking at steel, concrete, and fiber optics as the true foundation of our society. Sure, they build our cities, but the actual load-bearing scaffolding of an ideal world, it's human relational stability. If the intimate, microscopic core of society, the couple, collapses, the global fabric eventually goes right down with it.
This creates what the sources call a relational butterfly effect. Imagine a peacefully resolved argument in the morning. That leads to a stable home environment. That stable home directly lowers a person's cortisol levels. Now imagine that person is a CEO or maybe a top government official. Because they have lower stress and more mental bandwidth, they go on to make better, more rational workplace decisions. Maybe they save a vile union negotiation instead of letting it crash because of displaced, toxic anger. At scale, this directly leads to less societal polarization. A healthy couple is, quite literally, a public multiplier. It's amazing when you think about it. And this leads to a monumental paradigm shift. Right now, our social media networks basically operate like digital gladiator arenas, perfectly designed by algorithms to monetize our rage and indignation. But what if we applied these relational innovation frameworks, these empathy spell checkers, at a global scale? We could completely rewrite the code. We could inoculate our digital infrastructure to reward constructive listening, dismantle those echo chambers of hate, and actually encourage conflict resolution instead of just monetizing anger. But all of this leaves us with a really lingering, provocative question to close out today's explainer. If we actually reach a point of total optimization, where an infallible AI is constantly nudging us to be compassionate, checking our emotional grammar, and preventing every major fight, will we eventually lose our internal empathy muscles? By delegating our emotional heavy lifting to software, we really have to wonder what it truly means to remain human and genuinely compassionate. It's a wild paradox of total optimization that I'll leave you to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning the infrastructure around you.